Welcome to Momentum Investing, property investing made easy. One of the world's top podcasts on property investing, bringing you the top experts in the field so you can learn firsthand what it takes to create passive income and take control over your financial future.
Hi, and welcome to the Momentum Investing Podcast. I am very excited about today's episode because we are going to be covering one of the most important subjects to date. My guest, Jennifer Justice, the founder of the company, the Justice Department, works with equality in business and investing. One of the big problems today is that, for example, only 3% of venture capital dollars is being given to women. It is a huge problem because on average, women are better investors and better entrepreneurs, yet they're seeing so much less support in finance, in education, and in help when it comes to the investing side. That is something that is changing, but not changing fast enough. So in this episode, we're going to explore this issue. And Jennifer is going to share very exciting stories of how she's worked as a corporate solicitor, working with the entertainment industry, where there have been vast differences in salary and remuneration. She shares how she's helped Jay-Z found Rocknation and how they combated a lot of this, and how she in the Justice Department is helping women work with and get their fair share. She's going to share in this episode how we can act as a community to make sure that everyone is getting treated equally, no matter of their gender, their culture, or where they come from, or their education. The important thing is that you know what you're doing, you're making good investments, and then you deserve to get invested into. This is a very important episode. I hope you enjoy it. Stay tuned for Jennifer Justice from the Justice Department. So welcome to the Momentum Investing Podcast. I am here with Jennifer Justice. Welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Well, thank you for joining us. We're super excited. You have had quite a career and done a little bit of everything. So we're super excited to get into that, as well as discuss what I think a lot of, especially women, notice in business, and that me and Gisela, and my wife, my co-founder of Momentum Property Education, who run all our businesses together, have kind of noticed is how, especially in investing, we see women can be treated very differently than men.
Yes, that is true.
Sadly, right? Sadly. So
yeah.
We're going to be talking a bit about what can you do to change that? What kind of roles should women take, and how can we start affecting the change that I think is already happening, but that should be happening quicker.
Yeah, exactly.
So if you want to give us a little of your background, what have you done before, and what are you doing now?
Great. Thank you. Well, it's, it dates back a little while, but I am originally from Seattle, Washington, or, Washington State, actually, in small towns that most people probably have not heard of. I then, my mother didn't graduate high school. I didn't have, a family that went on to higher education. So I wasn't really sure what to do. And I knew that I didn't want to kind of be in that same kind of path. I, did well in school and ended up going to University of Washington. But when I graduated from college, I didn't, really know what to do. I didn't have any, the college roommate dad network or anything like that was, around to guide me. And so I literally, I was like, getting sent on insurance sales and wine distribution. And I'm like, okay, well, what do I do? And I decided, I looked at TV and I'm like, oh, I could be a doctor or a lawyer. And I was like, okay, I'll go to law school. So, and then the same time I was hanging out in the grunge scene, and all of those bands were like, we have attorneys and they're women. And I was like, great, that's what I'll do. I'll be an entertainment attorney. When ignorance is bliss, right? So I went to Cornell Law School solely to become an entertainment attorney. I came down to New York and started working for a big Wall Street firm because it's hard to get in entertainment. Thankfully met somebody and got hired. And one of the first, questions in the interview, well, I actually interviewed, this is very relevant for this conversation. I went to what I thought would be my holy grail of places to work in entertainment, right? Like the place they represented Madonna and U2 and Bruce Springsteen. And I walked in, and I was working at a big Wall Street firm. So I was wearing a suit and thinking, oh God, I'm so overdressed. And it looked exactly like my law firm, dark paneled walls and books. And also looked just like my law firm because it was filled with only men wearing
Right.
suits. And I said, and I couldn't help it. I literally couldn't help myself. And I said, this is the place I really wanted to work. And I go, um, where are the women? Are there any women
Mhm.
that work here? And he goes, oh yeah, out there. Didn't you see him? And I was like, you mean the assistants? And he was like, yeah. And then he like had this magic 8 ball on his desk and he shook it and he goes, is Jennifer Justice going to be great in this business? And he was like, looks like it. It's just you're very ambitious. And I was like, is that a bad thing? So needless to say, I did not get that job.
Right.
So then a few months later, I interview with another guy who calls me up and was just leaving that firm. I never met him. And he calls me up and I go meet with them and they're going through their whole litany of artists. And I knew I got the job then. Like I just really clicked with them, etc. So
Had
I
he
got a
heard of
call.
you from that interview or just
No,
separately?
but
No,
just
okay.
wait.
Yeah.
So he goes,
Patience. Oh.
patience, Daniel. So he calls me that next day and he goes, we loved you. We'd really like to come back in and talk, when you could we really like to offer you the job, etc. And he said, but it's funny. I went out with some of my old cronies from my old firm, which shall remain nameless, but it's easy to look up. And they said, I said, I just met with the most amazing woman and she's going to be so great. And guess what her name is? It's Jennifer Justice. And I said, oh yeah, we met with her, at the other firm. And they're like, well, why didn't we hire her? And he goes, she was too ambitious. And that set the
Wow.
tone of my entire trajectory of my career. And to this day, that firm has maybe one woman out of 40 male lawyers.
Wow. Wow. What did the one who became your employer say to his old
Yeah,
colleagues when they said that?
that's a bad thing.
Yeah, exactly.
And so he's like, great, I'm going to get her. And I made partner there in 3 years. I took on a very then unknown Jay-Z, a very then unknown Mark Ronson, just like really, burgeoning with their career, Redman, Method Man, Outkast, all of these people in hip hop. And that, and then I told the story of, where I was from, because what I'd realized when I was at a big Wall Street firm was that I couldn't get clients because I'm too ambitious. Like I really wanted clients.
Right.
And I knew that in the music industry I could, because a lot of them came from the same kind of background and I could identify with them in a very real way.
Right.
It's a very, very close relationship with, your attorney, especially in the music industry, because there's no, the agents really book their live part, and so they're still like their master recordings, their songwriting revenue, their merchandising, their sponsorship, endorsement. There's other things that you really become a bigger part of and really build
Right.
the
So
business terms.
the attorney actually deals with, all the royalties, all the sponsorships, all of the
Yeah,
kind of everything outside of the live events kind
yeah,
of thing.
and you're doing the business terms of them too.
Right.
So I rode that part out, right? And the whole time I also was doing a lot of executives. And I did a deal for an executive, a male, who was an entry level, director level, and he was offered $130,000 to this publishing company. And he
Right.
was an A&R, which means he signed the songwriters, which means he was a revenue generator, right? It's the
Right.
sales, basically, equivalent. And then I did a deal for his superior, who was a senior director, had signed a really big songwriter, and she was offered $90,000. And I'm like, I'm
And
sorry,
this is
wait, what?
his boss is actually getting paid $45,000 a year less
Yes,
than he
yes.
is.
And I'm like, wait, why is this okay? And they're like, well, everybody agreed to it. I was like, okay, but that's not okay. Like, why would you offer that? Because you never even offered the guy that. You just offered him this amount of money.
Yeah.
And so that solidified my quest for gender equality, because I didn't know in business, like that there was an inequality. I just thought you worked hard and you got paid the same.
Yeah.
And then, that's
And
just,
then you started doing the employee contracts and actually saw what everyone in the business was getting paid.
yeah. And also with artists, with female artists versus male artists, I started noticing a lot of discrepancies. So, then cut to fast forward 10 years in, I'm representing women in the C-suite, and, it's hundreds and hundreds of thousands of dollars of difference. It's compounding over to millions of dollars of net worth over time. I had done the deal for Jay-Z to start Rock Nation. I was part of that team. And he asked me to come in-house and be the general counsel for Rock Nation. So I was one of 4 people there, at the time. So then we helped build that out. I then became the EVP doing all strategic marketing and business development. So transferred over from just the legal, although obviously I was doing more business stuff anyway. And, in the meantime, still doing all of my gender equality work, had joined boards, nonprofit organizations about it, communities that were bringing, professional women together and networking, et cetera, outside of the music industry and inside of the music industry. And, Jay-Z had turned his hobbies into businesses. I was a part of all of that. Then started doing that for other artists on the roster from, Beyonce and Rihanna and Shakira and Kanye and Haim and Santi
Just
Gold.
those small people, right?
You're going to hear of them one day.
Yeah,
You heard it here first. And so then, so that was great and it was amazing. And, we took the company, we're doing joint ventures with companies who had complementary capabilities of ours. And we were just really growing the company very quickly. And then about 5 years ago, in the meantime, I had kids by myself. They were 2.5 years old. And I was like, you know what? I've been with Jay-Z for 17 years. And I'm like, I need a change. And so I had transitioned over to being the president of Superfly, which is a live experience company. They own Bonnaroo Music Festival. Well, they just sold it to Live Nation, Outside Lands in San Francisco. And so, was building out that more my skill set, wanted to prove to myself that I was really good. When you represent those kinds of people, it's like you have a lot of leverage just in and of itself. So I did that for 3 years, still doing all the gender equality work. And then, as that was coming to an end, I was like, what is my next move? And I was just noticing that, nothing was really changing for women. Like we were still 200 years behind gender equality. And as far as pay is concerned in the United States alone, we still hadn't, we still had the same, there were still the same amount of men, that were named, more named James or John in the Fortune 500 as CEOs than women at all,
Right.
and what was it that just wasn't working for us? And so I thought a lot about it and decided that what, women really needed was a female perspective to help them in business. And, doing the exact same thing that I'd done, which is, business development, legal, strategy, management. And then, so I started the Justice Department, which is exactly that. It's a law firm and it is a strategy and management business development consulting company. And we cater mostly to women in kind of like a higher, executive level or female founders, individuals turning their core business into brands. They all just kind of have the common denominator of wanting equality for women. And our main goal is to make women rich, because if women have money, they have power, and this world will be a better place when we're all equal. We are 50% of the population. I mean,
Yeah, it would make a difference. But that's such an exciting, journey you've made. And I mean, I just want to kind of look at, because there is there is a problem with equality, obviously. And I mean, you've seen that firsthand. But what do you see that women can do in that type of a situation? How do you even it out? How can we start moving in the right direction as a society?
I really think that first and foremost is understanding and knowledge that there's an issue, right?
Right.
It's an issue that there are women in the workplace, that the guy next to them with less experience, a lesser title, makes more money than them. It's just, it's not fair. Life is not fair, but it's not fair, right? And why would that be okay? And so there is an issue. To acknowledge the fact that there's an issue is the first thing. To then acknowledge that we are different, we think differently, we have a different chromosome, and that we walk into a room in the same manner is not, it would be unwise to feel that, because we are usually walking in to a room full of men.
Right.
And just imagine if you're a man, you notice when you walk into a room just full of women, and how does that make you feel? Okay, just just think about how we're walking into something. And when you're, only talking about sports or things that are very male centric,
Yeah.
right? It's no different than you walk in and women are talking about shoes and makeup.
Yeah.
You just have to think about it like that. It's like we have different interests and we are, we think differently. We assess risk differently. The reason being, and there's a lot of studies and understanding of how our brains work differently. Like we give birth. If we were just knee-jerk reaction, let's pull out, like children would not be born. You know what I mean? It's like we assess risk differently. We handle stressful situations differently. But we also, it's, tradition, it is just stigma, it is learned behavior over time that women need to be just properly like coddled and they can't handle the tough stuff, which we know that's not true. Again, we give birth. It's not
Exactly.
easy. Okay.
Yeah.
It is not easy. And so, just understanding our differences and approaching it that way, and not thinking that like you can just like go and say the exact same thing to a woman, and that it, like we don't know what it's like to walk around as a man in this world.
Yeah.
Like I would love to figure it, like I would love to see what it was like one day, but we don't, right?
Right.
And just to acknowledge those things, I think goes a long way from both sides. Women and men have to acknowledge it. And then you have to figure out how to not only diversify, but include women. I remember when I was first at Superfly, they would have all of these like, happy hours and it was all beer. And I'm like, majority of women don't drink beer. Some of the women do. I hate beer. I don't like it. Like,
Well, honestly, I'm with you. I'll drink a glass of wine rather than a beer.
Exactly.
But
I'm like, have you ever thought about that? And they were like, no, you're right. And they would all walk everywhere, right? We live in New York City. A lot of women wear heels. I'm like, it's hard to walk that far.
Yeah.
How cold the office is. That is because men wear suits, and I get it. You wear a couple of layers, and you get hot, but women usually don't. We don't have a couple of layers. Like all of these things play into, an unconscious gender bias.
Right.
And once you know
The
about them,
thermometer is set after the men's clothes, not the women's clothes, just something tiny like that. Yeah.
and it's like once you acknowledge these things, you're like, oh, okay, free feminine hygiene products in the bathroom, things like that like definitely don't have. I cannot stand the co-ed bathroom. I'm sorry, that's just not okay.
No, well, I get that. I don't like sharing a bathroom with guys either. So that
there's just so many like things you can deal with, right? And then just understanding the psychology. I mean, Harvard Business School has done so much work on this about how women, are portrayed by men and women when they ask for a raise. A man is seen as powerful, a woman is seen as complaining, and if you just notice your own bias toward it, then you go, okay, like the women do it too. This is not something that is gender,
no, and that's something I've heard. My mother works a lot in different. She's worked in a lot of roles with surrounding equality for both minorities and gender equality, and that's one of the big problems she's seen in a lot of organizations. When a woman has kind of fought their way to the top, for some reason they don't open the door for other women. Instead, they often make it actually tougher for other women, because it's like, well, I had to fight my way to the top, you get to too. Instead of saying like, now I'm in a position to make a change, let's get this equality, let's do this pure merit based, let's put the best person in the best role.
Right, exactly.
And so it actually goes both ways. It's sometimes some organizations are worse when a woman's taken over, and which is counterintuitive to me.
Exactly. No, I know. It's like when you walk into a place and you think, oh, I can have any single office in this place, your attitude is different than when you walk in and you go, I only see one office for a woman, that's the office I want. So you're immediately in competition.
Yeah.
Right. And so when you walk in, let's say to, let's use an instance of a place that's like mostly female, like a retail place, or, a clothing brand, or a, like a Vogue magazine or something like that, where there's a lot of different offices. It's not to say that it's not a hard place to work, but at least you can be like, oh, okay, I can see myself in a lot of different roles. And
Yeah.
if you can't, if a woman hasn't been in that role, you can't see yourself in it because you're like, you never have. It's no different than what we all just saw with Kamala Harris and the vice president. It's like, oh, now a woman can do it.
Yeah. Now it's
Where
okay.
those
Well,
roles have
actually,
been,
I should say a great example of that is now in Major League Baseball. Just
yeah,
like a year ago, the Giants hired the first ever, coach to join, the
yeah,
Major League coaching staff. And in
right,
the last 12 months, you got, you now have a female GM, you now have more coaches, you have, all
exactly.
over they're coming in. But it took whatever baseball is, 200 years to get one onto the on as an actual part of the coaching staff, and now in 12 months the door is open and lots have taken over.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Other things like, women get hired on experience, men on capability, and like I experienced that when I left Rock Nation and I was talking to
Well,
people. It's
how
like,
do you experience that? That sounds that's an interesting difference, but how does that play out in reality?
well, so I was told many times, well, you've never been a president before. So I was looking for a president role. I'm
Right.
like, well, neither was Barack Obama until he was the president. Like, why is it okay for men to get hired as CEOs and presidents over and over, but a
Right.
woman has to like actually, so you have to go up in your company and finally get there in order to like transition over laterally.
Right.
Very
And you
rare
don't
that a
see in
woman gets given.
comparison that men will
Yeah,
get that shot to prove themselves, while a woman
exactly.
has to prove
Yeah,
themselves first and then get the
yeah.
shot.
Yeah, these are all HBS like studies that have been done.
Yeah.
This is not something that I just came up with. You know what I
No,
mean?
no,
This is
no.
all
I'm
research
sure
based and all that stuff.
yeah.
Yeah. But
No,
these
but
are all things that like no one notices or would know until you hear it, and then you can look it up and you're like, oh, okay, I get it. These are all just preconceived notions and biases that we, have. And it's human beings that will take conscious behavior to then pivot and make those adjustments.
wow. That's just it's really interesting to me. And I mean, obviously, we see this in the property investing industry as well. I told you a story the first time we spoke
Yeah,
about how me and Gisela, because, we live in Sweden and we've always been blessed to be, it's a reasonably equal society. Obviously, it's far from perfect. We've never had a female prime minister, and there's hundreds of examples. But compared to other countries, we're pretty good at the equality question. And so in my everyday life, and Gisella's, we haven't really noticed it. But then we went to the UK and we were going to meet banks to talk about the potential for lending and partnership. And it was just so obvious when we walked into the room and we sat down. First off, everyone we met was men, right? It was a middle-aged white man sitting down, and every single time he would turn to me as if Gisela didn't exist, as if Gisela was my assistant, and we would have the
right.
meeting. And we were surprised, and it was like, we would talk. I might present the company, but then when it came to actually showing off our portfolio and our numbers, that's Gisela is the one who does the due diligence and does that. So I kind of handed it over to her, and it was like they were surprised. I mean, they were shocked, like, oh wait, she's still here. Is she going to talk now?
Yeah.
And then the moment she opened her mouth and she explained, then the dynamic changed, and they're like, wow, okay, she actually does know what she's talking about. But it was just that instant reaction to be that, well, obviously we have a man and a woman, so it's a man and his assistant is here to
Yeah.
meet me, was just their subconscious,
Right.
thought. And that surprised me.
Right. And look, it's like, and then maybe that man didn't had the best of intentions and didn't really
Well,
like think of
we're
it,
saying this
but
was four different men, four
yeah,
managers at the
exactly.
four of the major banks
Yeah.
in the UK, and it
Yeah.
played out exactly
Right.
the same.
Exactly. Right. So imagine like that happens to us all the time. And we get these bad raps in business where it's like, oh, they're so bitchy and like yell. It's like because we're so tired of saying the same thing over and over again. Like, just listen to me. I promise. I know what I'm doing. I promise. And so you just, it gets frustrating after a while to have to repeat yourself over and over and over again. and, to say your ideas, and then somebody comes and says the same thing, and like, oh, you're right, Brian, that was a great idea. You're like, I just said that.
Well, I can imagine though, when you were at Rock Nation and then you had these amazing brands behind you. I can imagine you had an opportunity to inflict some change there. I mean, did you notice that you were treated differently then, or that you could bring in
Well,
women in other roles?
I mean, there was, that whole organization were outliers. I mean, nobody in that organization was protected by the Constitution. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's there were maybe one or two white men, and like there's probably a little bit more now, but because they're, they do a bunch of sports stuff. But yeah, it was already diverse and inclusive from their definition of it, and that was by design that Jay wanted to do that.
And but how did that then get mirrored? Like, so obviously you were working with a lot of external companies. Did you see that you guys would have a positive effect that way on companies you were working on, or?
I mean, some, we would do a lot of partnerships and things like that would, be like, look, you need some consulting in this area. Before D&I was a thing, really kind of doing it from the top down, to talk with, be a consultant to C-suite on how you could actually address these, issues within your company. So, that had been happening for a long time, which was great.
Yeah.
But it never, it didn't really stop when Superfly, it was, run by 4 white men who were great and best intentions and all of that. But when we were going through a raising round and we were raising money, but I was leading the charge, it'd mostly be email or phone. And then we would finally get to meet, and they would immediately look to my junior associate or whatever that was, instead of was having the Gisela problem, where it was no, I'm the one who's leading this. It's me. I promise.
Right. Yeah. So you
and
don't
they would have to be like, oh, they're like, oh, JJ knows the answer. Oh, JJ, people call me JJ, JJ, and they would be like, oh, right. It's like, oh my God, why?
Yeah. Oh, that's nuts. I mean, but yeah, I'm so surprised, and we see that in the financial industry overall. It's, I think it's, what is it, 3% of all the money is going to female entrepreneurs.
Yeah. It's 2% actually.
2%
go to female
even.
founders, and if you're a woman of color, it's 0.5%.
Oh wow!
Right.
And I actually interviewed another woman, Laura Stein, brilliant female entrepreneur as well, and she was talking about the same thing when she's been raising from venture capital firms.
Right.
Is, she's got a business partner who's an older white man, and in some meetings she just had to have him come and literally sit at the table so that she could run the meeting, but they could kind of look at him and he'd go, yes. This is for real.
Yeah.
Yes, listen to her. I'm confirming that this is real, but she'll do the talking. And just have to leverage that. And it's ridiculous. She's brilliant. She was the founder of TEDx. And she still has to have a man sit there and say, yes, what she's doing is good.
Right. And it's such a missed opportunity because women spend money, and we control 80% of the purchasing power. And if we are given, money to build our companies, women are going to buy the products because they're made by women for women, right? We understand.
I can't help that. That just gives me a flashback to the movie What Women Want with
exactly.
It's but that's so true too. It's women are taking a bigger and taking over the spending dollars. So obviously, there are so many female entrepreneurs that have proven that, when just look at Spanx with Sarah Blakely. I mean, that's just such a perfect example of no man would have ever come up with that product.
Yeah, exactly. Why would they think that was, something that women wanted or whatever? And, all of the newer beauty movements where there's community built around it, or everything that Gwyneth Paltrow is doing at Goop. These are all things that are filling needs. And that, there's so many, Black female entrepreneurs that are filling gaps for, Black women in hair and mental health, and, things that are very specific to a population of women that is definitely broad enough to scale on a global level. because it's dealing with an issue that is, that almost all of them, a whole population is dealing with. So, it's such a great idea to invest in women. So I don't know why it's taking so long. I mean, a lot of it has to do with, I think, tech and scalability, and women tend to do a lot of stuff toward community and retail product, et cetera. But, we're the ones choosing the products for our families. We're the ones who are buying the food for our families. So if things happen to be better, more, cleaner, et cetera, we're going to buy them, and we're going to do the research, and lifting women up is not putting men down. Like, it's not pie, right? It's just like adding more money to this whole, the whole economy, and making it better. That's what we think.
Well, I mean, for us in Momentum Property Education, I think around 60% of all our students are women, jumping into the property investing industry, which I think is brilliant. But I think it's a question I kind of want to wrap up a little on is, it is harder for women to raise finance generally. So what can a woman do to make it easier, or to kind of even the playing field? So if I'm a woman starting out in property investing and I'm trying to raise capital, what do I do? What do I do just to get the same opportunity or to level that playing field?
I mean, that's definitely a hard question to answer.
That's $1 million question.
It is. And so women are moving to alternative, ways. First of all, I Fund Women, which is another organization that funds for, it's kind of, it's, group lending, basically, the lending circle. It's, crowdfunding. Women are looking more to each other for that. There's more female, VCs and private equity companies that are starting up. There's also, different banks that are focusing more toward women and people of color. So, because getting friends and family money, that's one of the issues. One of the reasons why it's harder for women to raise money from a VC is they're like, well, you didn't raise friends and family money. It's like, well, because we don't have friends and family that give women money, they bet on men. And then when the men get the money, they bet on, and so when you're like, I don't really understand the problem, then they're going to be like, oh, okay, well, never mind. And so it takes a woman a long time, and she's got to be, super experienced in order for anybody to take her seriously in those things. It's really difficult. So, we're still trying to solve that problem. When I see like Melinda Gates and Mackenzie Bezos, like commit all, $50 million or whatever to this fund for nonprofits, I'm like, that's great, but like, put it in women. Like, it's like, what is $50 million? Like, pick, these women and invest in them, right? It's just, don't ask the question. Just do it, because we have better returns ultimately over periods of time. So I wish I could answer that. When anybody knows that, please reach out to me and let me know, because we're looking for those.
Awesome.
Answers.
Well, all right, we'll say that the moment anyone here listening figures out how to level the playing field, send me a message. I'll connect you to Jennifer right away. But if someone wants to connect with you, if they want to learn more from you or see what you're doing in the Justice Department, how can they reach you? How can they connect with you?
Well, on email, it's info@thejusticedepartment.com, and that's DEPT, because our Justice Department did not buy that domain, so I did on GoDaddy.
Well done, well
for
played.
$14.99. Yeah. Yes. And then through Instagram, we're at, and I'm on LinkedIn at Jennifer Justice, and on Instagram, I'm at Jennifer Justice League, and at thejustice.dept. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, that's where we are.
Very cool. I'll add the links to this in the show notes, so please connect with Jennifer. I also have some great updates here in a moment, so stick with us. Jennifer, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you. Bye, everyone.
Bye. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much for joining us today. As you know, it is an important part of our journey to help others and support each other. In our next episode, we have an amazing person called Kelly Forrester. Kelly set up a lettings agency and built it into a large company before coming on to hard times. And she shares that entire story of the challenges and finally the bankruptcy. It is a powerful, powerful story, and I'm very glad that she came and shared, because it is important to understand the challenges, the setbacks, and what we go through as entrepreneurs. I hope you enjoyed the episode. Make sure you subscribe to the Momentum Investing Podcast because we want to be able to reach out to you every time we have an episode. And please tell your friends so that we can reach out and help more people. Thank you so much for joining us here today. If you want to start your property investing journey, go to momentumgift.com. We have a free course, an introduction to property investing, waiting for you. Thank you so much, and I'll see you soon.